Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Board Explorer, and this is another of my stories. Coming to the end, actually, of my story, pretty much up to date, perhaps a couple more. And then who knows? The story isn't over, hopefully. Hopefully there's a few more years and down the line I can do some more of these. So in this episode, I thought I would talk about the times that I did corporate entertaining. I've alluded to it many times, saying that I did a bit of juggling and unicycling, fire eating, stilt walking, robotics, all those sort of things. And I will do one in which I'll go through some of the old photographs that I have got. It's just they are packed away in all sorts of different places, and it would be perhaps good just to do an episode in which I share all of that, especially if you've followed this series and you're familiar with the overall story. I'll see if I can dig out a coherent set of pictures. But anyway, for now, this is really just about my time as a corporate entertainer. I don't do it anymore. I've moved on, as you know, and I do mainly full-time on YouTube. But there was a time when, in order to pay the rent, I would go out and perform at, I call it corporate entertainment. It would be a whole series of different things, from family fun days, gala days. There would be times when I would be performing as a busker, but often more paid to be a busker, which was a strange thing. Shopping centres, for example, they like to have that feeling that their shopping centre was so interesting and so busy and so full of life that buskers would want to perform there. And very often they would actually pay people to effectively busk, just to give that appearance that it was a cool place, often when they were relatively new or they'd had a transformation. And so a number of us entertainers would go in with a kind of busking show, or they would have weeks of entertainment in the summer holidays. It's the summer holidays, as I recall this, and kids are out and about, and often, in order to get the kids going to the shopping centres, and therefore bring the parents and therefore get the whole family to spend money, they would have entertainers in there. So I might be dressed up as a robot doing my sort of robotic stuff that I used to do back in the day, and that was a very bad illustration of it. Mime, unicycling. I used to balance on a yellow ball and juggle 5 balls. I used to walk on stilts and juggle knives. I would do perhaps my danger show, which involved lying on a bed of nails and having a large person stand on me for a duration whilst I was stripped to the waist. I would get freshly broken glass, and in fact members of the audience would come out and smash the glass, and I would walk on that. And fire eating, of course. I did a bit of fire eating, fire rolling, and I think I've told you in the past about some of those antics. Well, today I want to tell you about some of the character stuff that I used to do. Very often people would enjoy meet and greet characters, as they were called, at the corporate events. So sometimes this might be, again, for family shows or gala shows, but I did a lot of corporate stuff and what I used to call Park Lane hotels. These would be the posh hotels in London, including Park Lane ones, but not exclusively those. They could be all sorts of ones, and or private functions for businesses in perhaps Canary Wharf or other sort of centres of business, I guess. And sometimes these would be madcap characters, so they might have a theme, and it might be American movies, that might be the theme. And I might go there as a pretend movie director, and you start sort of herding people together whilst they're milling around and mingling and getting them together, take a picture of them or put wigs on them or you know, that sort of thing, and sort of have a megaphone and all of that. I didn't do too many of the Hollywood theme stuff, but one of the sort of things that we did loads of was comedy bouncers. A friend of mine, Nigel, who was in Snug and Cozy, we would be dressed up as comedy bouncers. So we would initially, as far as anyone was concerned, we would look like doorman. So we'd be in a black suit, perhaps dark glasses, looking very official. And then we would ask people for their invitations and passes and things when people hadn't got an invitation or a pass. So the event was, it was for a business, everybody was invited, and they would turn up and we'd say, right, can we see your pass, please? And they would go, a pass? Yes, you have to have a pass. Sorry, only people in one leg are allowed in on this one. Or we would usher people on one side of the corridor. There'd be a big wide corridor to get to the event room. And we would say, sorry, can you just adhere to this wall because there's carpet on this side and we don't want anyone walking on the carpet. So if there was a red carpet, for example, we would deliberately say, sorry, you can't walk on the carpet, that's for VIPs. And they would, but we are the VIP. No, I'm ever so sorry. Could you just walk around the cones? Nobody in a green blazer is allowed in. Sorry, sir, can you? And of course, people would be slightly affronted initially, and then they would realise it was a joke. And we would just rely on improvisation, really. You'd see somebody perhaps with, say big frizzy hair, and you'd say, I'm sorry, sir, you'll have to get a haircut before we come in. Before you're allowed in, and so you just do it with a very straight face, and people loved it. They thought it was funny, and then they would say, did you see those doormen at the weren't they funny? And all of that. So we did that. One of the things that my favourite character stuff was the spoof waiters. This is again where you're not really a waiter at all, but the audience think you are. Now, the thing about waiters is, sadly, they're invisible. If you're in a waiter's outfit that matches the rest of the waiters at the hotel or the environment that you happen to be in, you basically disappear. You could put on a waiter's outfit and walk into any hotel, as long as it's the same sort of colours that the hotels use, and often it's just black and white shirt, or black waistcoat if you're a bloke, black trousers, etc. You could just walk in and pretty much go anywhere unchallenged. It's like that thing about having a fluorescent jacket on. You could pretty much go anywhere and people just assume that you are official. And that's how the spoof waiters worked. So often an event would be going on, a dinner usually. There might be a buffet or something at the drinks reception, perhaps at the beginning, and then everybody goes and sits down. Now, this worked best when it was more exclusive and much more posh. The posher the event, the better this worked. So there would I be, booked by somebody, usually a secretary who was being told to have some entertainment. None of the guests, apart from the booker, would know that they had booked a spoof waiter. So this event would take place, people would be arriving, and they'd, like an office event or a charity event, something like that. People generally would know each other or get together or whatever it was, and they would have perhaps champagne or wine. There'd be a few nibbles, and then you'd move in and you'd sit down and have the meal. And meanwhile, all the time, the waiters are floating about. Now, sometimes I would turn up and the catering staff at the hotel had no idea that a spoof waiter was going to be among them. And it was only then that they were told that there was this chap who was a waiter. Sometimes they weren't even told. And I would turn up and I would, perhaps the, excuse me, the head waiter would know, but none of the staff. And sometimes they did that deliberately so that the staff wouldn't give it away, because it was essential that nobody knew, because I would rack up the wackiness or the stupid stuff that I was doing over the evening. And if you gave it away too quickly, you'd ruin the illusion. So I would turn up. Sometimes the staff didn't know and they'd say, oh, who are you? And I said, well, I've come from the agency. And they would go, oh, okay, because agency staff was everywhere. Of course, I wasn't lying. I was from the agency, but it was an entertainment agency, not a catering agency. So I didn't make that bit clear to them, but they took it as read. I'm dressed as a waiter. Why would they not believe me? But often they did know. When they did know, that was quite tricky actually, because they would, yes, it was very touch and go whether they would give the game away. Whereas when they didn't know, they were genuinely also shocked by how I performed. So initially, you've got people coming into a reception. So a typical event would run like this. The posh people would come in, and, oh, hello, how are you? Oh, it's very nice to see you. And you'd be there perhaps handing out glasses of champagne. Perhaps you're standing there with a tray of drinks, whatever it might be. Or you've got some nibbles to pass around the event as people are, you know, chin-wagging in the evening. And so you're dressed as a waiter, you look like a waiter, and you have, I would play it deadly serious so that nobody would even think for a while that I was anything else, except I was just that little bit enthusiastic. So there is somebody posh standing there talking to somebody, yes, drinking their champagne. And as they took a drink, you know, they may have only had a little sip. And I would just sidle in next to them with a bottle of champagne and just top it up. Oh, thank you very much. And then they would chat away, and I would just sort of hover nearby, and then they would take another sip. And as they moved the glass away, oh yes, I would be there topping it up. And when I say top it up, I would put it right to the very brim. So it's like, oh, yeah, steady. So I was just too eager as a waiter. This was a time when people were smoking, and smoking wasn't banned, and people were smoking there like, yeah, how's the new car going? Puff, puff, and all of this. And I would have an ashtray, and I would just come up to them as they're like this with a little bit of ash on their cigarette, and underneath I would just hover like this until they were aware of me. And very often, you know, because you're a waiter, as I say, you're invisible. Oh, thank you. And then they would tap their ash and take another drag, and suddenly I'm back with the ashtray, and then I would be there. Often people would say, oh, could I have another drop of champagne, please? And I would go, yes, of course, and walk off and not come back. Oh, I say. And often they would, you know, say, oh, would you like some more champagne? No, not for me, thank you. Then I would just pour it anyway. No, I said no. Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Lots and lots of crazy things would go on during that session, all very subtle. Sometimes I would be, somebody had a bit of a cleaning fetish. And so, you know, somebody taps there's an ashtray on the table, and someone would tap their cigarette ends into the ashtray, and I'm over there like a shot, boom, with a tea towel, clean it up like this, put it back, and then somebody else would come over there, and I would watch them, and they would see me watching them putting their cigarette out, you know, almost intimidatingly, putting their cigarette out, and then I would flick the contents onto the floor and clean this thing. And so I was doing these things not in an obvious way, but subtly, and people would pick up and go, that waiter's a bit odd. Anyway, then they would all sit down, and this is where the fun really began. One of the classic things was that you might have perhaps soup to start with or something, and you'd be served bread rolls. And often the waiters would come out with bread rolls in a basket, and perhaps with a fork and a spoon, they would lift them up and put them on the side plates as they went round the main tables. And you would say, bread roll for you, sir? Oh, yes, please. Brown or white? I have a bright one. And so, you know, you do all this. Well, I didn't. I discovered that if you got two spoons, put them back to back, and you try to lift up a bread roll, you can't, because the spoons, because of the curved shape, pushes the bread roll out. So I would be there, quite awkward. Bread roll? Yeah, brown or white? Brown, please. Right. And you'd be trying to pick this sodding thing up, chasing it around the basket like this. So it's going. Eventually you might get it, but you may have squished it really badly and plonk it on the plate. And the people, you know, these posh people are busy chatting. It slowly dawns on you that you're struggling, and they're watching you, and then up comes this squashed bread roll on the plate. Very often though, I'd be doing this, trying to serve it, and they would turn around and say, let me help you. And they would just select, take it by hand, and you'd go around. And of course, people opposite you are going, oh, he's not quite with it. They didn't realise for a long time that you weren't really a waiter, that you were an actor playing a waiter, but they could see there was something about you. So, oh, he's obviously new, poor bloke. So you became aware of people were watching you. Some of them got it and realised you were a stooge, but they loved it because other people didn't. And some people would get a little bit ratty with you. And I would play it just 100% genuine, and it would be hilarious. Once they've got their soups in, sometimes, depending on, I didn't want to give the game away too early, someone would spread their bread roll with their butter and what have you, be chatting. And I would just whiz past, nick the bread roll and eat it and walk out. And they would go, what? And somebody over there would have seen it. You see, I keep saying this a lot, that waiters are invisible. They are. So it's amazing, you're pushing all the time, how far can I go? But I don't want to go too far. So, you know, somebody would see that, but usually not the people around it. Oh, my bread roll's gone. Sometimes I would pick up the bread roll, eat a bit and put it back. And they would, did you see that? Did you just see it? Did he just do what I thought? Then, of course, it came to clearing the plates. And so I never served the food. I made that a bit of a principle not to serve the food, unless it was just one bowl or something, because these waiters in the posh places, they're trained in silver service, and I wasn't. And you'd watch them take the plates at the end of the meal and line them up here, and with amazing dexterity, you know, real skills, never dropping anything and being perfect. And then there's me, who has no training whatsoever, and I'm coming in and I am stacking plates with food, so stuff is squished. I mean, it was quite gross. So someone would finish and I would stack these things in the most uncanny way with the cutlery in there. So in the end, you've got this quite a big tower, and especially if it's a large event and there's, I don't know, 100 people at 10 tables of 10 people each or something, and you're going around with this often big stack like that, and people go, oh my God, he's going to drop them. And spoons and knives and forks would fall on the floor, and I would scurry off and come scurrying back, picking them up, and people going, oh my God, that waiter. And again, they still weren't quite there that you were a spoof. And often, one of the funny things that I would do with any meal when you're clearing, I loved the clearing, it was the funniest bit. People like, you know, you get to the end of your meal and there's that last mouthful and you scrape it up like this. And as they're putting that last mouthful into their mouth, I've spotted them, you know, because all the time you're working out who is fun to work with, who isn't, who's not going to get it, who might get cross with you, you know, this sort of thing. And so someone just puts it in their mouth, and as they put their spoon down, boom, the plate goes. So I'm in there, thank you. And it's like, oh blimey. And sometimes they take the last mouthful and I would just take the plate, so they're left holding the spoon. It was, and of course, most waiters would have certain tables that they would work, and I was free to work on any table. So I would see somebody who was just doing that last mouthful and I would whiz in, take that plate, go to a completely different table, and then take somebody else who's on the same sort of thing and whiz off like that. There's just so many gags that you make up on the spot, and I absolutely loved it. I couldn't do it once I'd lost my eye, because you needed both fields of peripheral vision, because what you didn't want to do is to have an accident. You didn't want to get food on people so that then they had the expense of washing their clothes and stuff. Whereas I would be carrying these plates with gravy or custard or whatever it was, and I would allow it to dribble down on my shirt and get over and all over the place. And often I would go disappear, and I would have a little bag of talcum powder, which I would sprinkle on me. So each time I come back from the kitchen, I'm a bit more filthier. I would untuck my shirt a bit. undo a button a bit and be a bit more disarrayed. I remember at one very, very exclusive event, it was a company, an American company in England, I think somewhere near Windsor, and they were moving into new premises. And before they'd left the old premises, I think it was during the Christmas break, that the new premises would be where they were all going to move into. So the staff were given a chance to look at the new premises and work out where their desks were and all of this. And there was only probably about 50 people in the room, and they were having the reception. They had these waiters, a little catering company who supplied all of this. And so there were I think there were probably just 2 other guys, 2 waiters and me. So there were 3 waiters, with me being the spoof. I dressed in the same gear that they dressed. Often they would give you a spare set if it wasn't black and white, which I would always have. And so throughout that evening, various comedy things was going, and I had a bottle of wine. Well, I had a wine bottle filled with water, and often in the doorway to where the kitchen was, or the spare room that was being, the office that was being used as a kitchen, whilst this very important thing was going on, I would have this bottle and I'd be pouring out, you know, glass and what have you, and you'd just see me taking a little sip as I disappeared. Most people didn't see it at first. Eventually, I'm drinking a little bit out of the bottle, and then I would go and serve some more aperitif, sir, aperitif, and serve these stuff. And I, as the evening went on, I just get myself, this is a little bit tiddly. So as people would say, excuse me, could I get another drink? And you say, another what, sir? Another drink. Oh, yes, of course you can. They're just, no, would you fetch me one as you're paid to do that? Oh, yes, because sorry, of course. What did you say it was? I have another red wine, please. Red wine. Yes, now, if you could get it now, that would be useful. Oh, yes, sorry. So I would get myself a little bit more drunk. And then in the end, I'm in the doorway, actually with the bottle, tipping it down my throat. And eventually, and people thought I was genuine. And eventually, this got back to the MD, who had been watching, and he was annoyed. And eventually I was summoned to talk to him in a spare room at this office. So I'm going through the room. They said, Mr. So-and-so would like to speak to you. Can you go and see him immediately? I was going, oh yeah, that's no problem at all. I'll go and see him. But where is he? And so I'd go there, this drunk, obviously a drunk waiter, but not, you know, not comedy drunk. And in I'd go, and this waiter this boss bloke, American, tore into me, and he was on, and he said, this is disrespect, we've never seen it, you've been seen drinking in there, I've never seen anything like that, this is outrageous. And he went on and on and on, and I just stood there swaying as I was listening to him. Yeah, right, whatever. I was, you know, doing all this. And then eventually he said, you know, don't you think this is absolutely outrageous behaviour for a waiter? And so I just went, well, if I was a waiter, yes. And he looked at me and went, what? I said, and then I snapped out of it and I said, the thing is, I'm an actor. This is a spoof. I've been paid by your secretary. And he went, no way! And he went from being really angry to really loving it. And I said, look, I've still got about 45 minutes of my time to do. Don't go back in and smile and give the game away that I'm an actor. Just say you've given me a big telling off, because I'll build this up and I might even collapse in the middle of the room or something. And, you know, and he was going, oh yeah, that would be great. We'll love that. And of course, the thing is, he walked back into the room, great big grin, told a few people, he said, he's not an actor, he's not a waiter, he's an actor. And of course, it killed it, absolutely killed it, stone dead, that was it. It was hilarious, but it was hilarious. I used to love doing that. There's so many different stories about the spoof waitering and the way that people just went along with it. It was great fun. But I've taken up a lot of your time. Thank you so much for listening to my stories of my corporate entertaining, and I will catch up with you. Another of these stories next time. Until then, take care. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.